Well, it's good to have you down in sunny Melbourne, and I've put on a little...
Where's the evidence?
Sorry about that. Well, while we have our coffee, I wanted to talk to you about the election that was and some of the questions that you've been fielding from investors and from owner-occupiers and from anyone who's generally had lots of questions about all of this, because I've found that the looming election caused people to do nothing. So not necessarily the result of the election or the threat of what Labor could have done, but just the fact that we had a federal election. So
Yeah.
how did you find it?
It slowed down inquiry, and most investors were sort of contacting me saying, what am I going to do? And I think what a lot of investors might have started doing is buying new property, which your professor mate Peter made some good points about a potential cottage sort of spruiker industry. So that was a real concern, and one of those sort of unintended consequences of the negative gearing policy that perhaps a lot of people hadn't thought about. And there's a few different ways that the tax policy could have had these unintended consequences. But investors were sitting on their hands. I think they do that during an election at the best of times, but this one was going to create some real big structural changes within property. So I guess investor activity was down on this potential threat to the way that they do business, and difficult to sort of know what the future was for their assets. So yeah, people might have sort of got in and locked in the grandfather benefits, but they couldn't really model exactly what would happen under the negative gearing abolition and CGT. I know you've got your Louis Christophers of the world who are pretty good forecasters and that sort of stuff, but no one was really going to know exactly what was going to happen. So I think people were a little bit fearful of that.
Fearful of the unknown.
Fearful of the unknown, exactly. I think people would still have transacted, but there would have been a little bit more fear about the type of asset that they're looking at. We know from our stats that almost 50% of people, like it's 44, 46, depending on who you speak to, of people are buying new property. So it's a big chunk. I would have expected that to maybe increase. I think it's possibly a good thing that investors won't be pushed a little bit more to some of these off the plan type scenarios, because as you know, and have sort of like campaigned the negatives for. So yeah, look, it's back to business. There's a lot more certainty in the market, and the big sort of headwind now is investors getting the finance. And we've already seen that APRA are sort of indicating that their 7% buffer, or the 7.25% that the banks are doing, is going to lower probably in the end of June, maybe thinking. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be great?
It'd be fantastic, but I don't think it's going to be back to the good old days where your broker sort of says, like, fill out your living expenses. Actually, don't worry about that. Just sign it and I'll do it.
I think those days are well and truly gone.
Yeah. So I don't think it'll have as big an impact as some people are suggesting. But really, that was the main reason for me that we saw investor activity fall, and even just property transactions in general. Yes, people were worried about the election, but there was a real credit crunch.
It's really interesting. From the property point of view, we've seen homeowners who are reluctant to sell their property through an election period, because in Melbourne and Sydney, if they've got an auction campaign, they effectively lose some really good inspection opportunities on a weekend where everyone's obsessed with the election. So that was one reason, and also the uncertainty of what their property could sell for. So we've seen vendors contract, we've seen buyers really sitting on the fence, even homeowners who you think it's not going to have any impact on them if it's a home and they're happy to live there, and the value of the property is really inconsequential when it's your own home, but that's not how people think. It's very, very important. So we've seen slower vendor activity, slower purchaser activity, slower investor activity. It was just grinding to a halt. So I think we'll have some interesting green shoots.
Yeah, a lot more transactions, I think, than we would have seen. And the 6 months of locking in those benefits, that could have been a real busy time. But again, it's that finance as well. I think that was the slowdown. But we'll see.
I think you're right.